Hi, wonderfully created. Welcome back to CreatedIAm. We have measured ourselves, drafted the front and back basic block. What we need to do now is create our waistband and add allowance. Check out the description box for additional information, timestamps, and ways for you to support CreatedIAm. Make sure to like, share, and comment to increase traffic so we can keep doing what we do here on CreatedIAm. Stay tuned till the end where I'm going to give you another checkpoint so you can make sure you're on track with your piece. Let's add allowance. There are two ways you can generally do this. I'm going to show you how to do both methods. Here we have the front pattern piece. I will look to add a 1 cm seam allowance. You can use whichever allowance size you prefer when sewing. I also mark 1 cm along the crotch curve. I know some people might add more allowance at this stage, but I find that it's not necessarily needed and 1 cm keeps it simple. Later on, I'm going to show you how to add a zip so that your trousers is fitted. I'm going to mark 1 cm around the sides of the trousers apart from one section. Mark 1 cm at various points on your trousers. At the bottom of your trousers, we're going to extend the allowance to 2 centimeters or 1 inch. This is to give room for the consideration that we might be folding the allowance back twice when finishing the bottom of the trousers. Once all your dashes have been made, take your ruler and join the straight lines first. Use your French ruler to connect the curved parts. Do this carefully and in stages if you need to. If you've been using a pencil all along, feel free to now go over your major lines with a pen. Label your allowance 1 centimeter 1 inch so you remember what you did for future use. I made my basic block on one piece of paper that was folded in half. We need to unfold this because you don't want to cut the front at the same time as the back because they don't have the same shape. Make sure to use a paper scissors, not your fabric scissors, to cut this out. The second method is using a new piece of paper to copy the first block. So we need to cut out the basic block. Here I cut out my back pattern piece. Make sure to cut the correct lines. If you made any adjustments at the waist or at the crotch extension, you want to make sure you're cutting the right lines. If you cut something by mistake, don't worry. You can always get some tape it back up, recut it and move on. Take a piece of paper that is big enough to hold your pattern. You probably need about 1 to 2 inches all the way around. Take your basic block and put it on your new piece of paper, weigh it down or tack it in place temporarily. Carefully trace all around it without moving it. Before you remove it, make sure to mark the major points that you used on your original block. You want your new piece with the allowance to still show you the major measurements and points you used. Don't forget to lift or pierce through your dart to transfer over that information as well. Later, when you finish, these can be labeled so you have reference to what each line or dash represents. Once you remove your basic block, connect the dashes along the straight edges using your straight ruler. Like the front block, I am going to use a 1 centimeter allowance all the way around. I am going to be placing my invisible zip at the back center crotch line curve. I am still going to maintain a 1 centimeter seam allowance at this curve. At the bottom, so it matches the front, make sure to add your 2 centimeter to 1 inch allowance instead of the 1 centimeter allowance. Once done, connect this with your ruler or your French curve. Label and write down measurements if you prefer, and then cut this out. When we sew this piece, we are going to place a zip at the back crotch as mentioned before. That being said, because we haven't adjusted the seam allowance around the hip and waist area, we maintain the 1 centimeter. You can actually put your zip at the sides or at the front or at the back. Let's make the waistband. There are different ways you can make a waistband. I'm going to show you a simple, straightforward way. For this waistband, you need two measurements, your waist circumference and your waistband depth. Take your full waist circumference and divide it by 2. Then draw a line that is the length of this measurement that you halve. Once done, we need to decide our depth. Whatever your waistband depth is, double it. My waistband depth is 1 inch, so I'm going to double that to make it 2 inches. Mark that measurement at various points and then connect them to make a parallel straight line. We are doubling our waist depth so that when we fold it, we can add strength at our waistband, and when we fold it, it will go back to the original waist depth. Mine would be 1 inch. We need to now connect the ends so that we can make a rectangle. This rectangle is half the circumference of your waist and is double the depth of your waistband. Once drawn, you need to label one of your short sides. Label it fold. This is to remind you that you need to cut this on a fold, so when you open up the material, it will wrap around your full waist circumference. At this point you marked fold, extend the line so you have space to draw your seam allowance. Mark the seam allowance, whatever your preference is, all the way around. Connect this with a straight ruler. Notice I did not add seam allowance at the fold because we won't need it there. To remind you to fold it along the length of the waistband, you can put on dashes halfway through so that when you fold it, you get the 1 inch waistband. Add details like the measurements you used so that you remember how to apply this when you cut it out later. Before we move on, I want to list the tools you will need when sewing the material of your trousers together. This is so in the next section we can jump straight in. You don't want to find out halfway through the project you have a key part missing. The first one is a hand sewing needle if you know you want to do invisible stitches. Second is a seam ripper just in case you make any errors. Still hold on to your flexible tape in case you need to make any adjustments based on your body measurements. Clips, pins or weights will help you keep your material together. A fabric chalk or pen will help you transfer your measurements and lines. Make sure you have your material, of course, and do consider whether or not it's stretch or non-stretch. My material is non-stretch and the grain line does not play a factor into my material. Grab your fabric scissors or a mat and cutter. Make sure you have your zipper foot, especially for an invisible zip. Optionally, you can have fabric fusing and interfacing, which you're going to add to the waist to help it hold strong through wear and tear. Don't forget your straight ruler, your zip, which should be at least 9 inches, and of course your sewing machine. You're finding these videos useful? Perfect. Support by liking, subscribing, sharing the link with your creative community, and sending me a Ko-fi if you'd like to. In all this, please remember that you are wonderfully, beautifully, purposefully created.